Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Ampire Media, Ampire. Always much appreciated when you tune in. Don't forget, you can read my work on ESPN.com. Have a story up about the run defense now, and I'll have another story up actually shortly. We'll have an NFC East roundtable coming up in about a week or so. So, anyways, look for that on ESPN.com. In a minute, I'll be joined by Sam Fortier from the Washington Post. I wanted to have Sam on. He's got some news about his time on the beat. So stay tuned for that. But also, he just recently wrote a story on the factor of luck in the Commanders season last year and he'll define it for you and just what would qualify as that. It could be drop passes by the opposition, Malik Neighbors, Devontae Smith, etc. But there also I try to balance some of that out by saying, okay, what about this factor that would have affected the Commanders in a different way? Or is this something that carries over year to year? Or does it self-correct? Like if you have too much one year, it goes back the other way, because there are ways that you can prevent from needing to have those drop passes go your way to win a game. And have they done enough of that? And then we have a long talk about Jaden Daniels. And just one of the things that Sam talked about were some drop passes. And one of the things he was interested in was how quickly does Jaden Daniels go back to guys who just dropped a pass? And then what it reveals about him. And just there are a lot of examples. I thought it was a fun discussion with Sam. Always enjoyed it. So, anyways, stay tuned for that. On Monday, I will be joined by Clinton Portis. So I had a good conversation with him the other day. Just a lot about him coaching with Deshaun Jackson, Delaware State, but also about his career. What if he had played with a quarterback like Jaden Daniels? What might he have done? I thought his answer was interesting. I thought it was going to go one way, and it didn't. So good perspective from Clinton. He talked about messages he shares with his players, and that includes everything he's gone through, right? The jail, the highs, the lows, everything. So stay tuned for that on Monday. Good conversation with Clinton. Again, Monday. So there you go. That's one reminder for me, just as I'm going to be doing this every so often. For you males, go to your doctor, ask about getting a PSA test for prostate cancer. So just please do that. And if a few of you do it and things come back great, that is great. And if something gets caught early, then you're much better off. So, anyways, do me a favor, talk to your doctor about getting a PSA test. That's it, folks. Oh, by the way, at the end of the conversation, because we have a time limit on these, Sam was cut off in the middle of a part. It was nothing to do with anything you're going to learn, just something, just wrapping up a couple things. But you'll see, not a big deal. But if you wonder, like, where the heck did that cut off, or why did it go then? That's why. Just ran out of time. Anyway, that's it, folks. Here's my conversation with the Washington Post, Sam Fortier. All right, Sam. So you have a little bit of news to share about your time covering the Commanders. Here's the floor.
After 5 seasons, I'm going to be leaving the Commanders beat to take a new role at the Post. It's called Sports Enterprise. Basically, I'm going to be writing national sports features. It's bittersweet, right? I'm really excited for this new challenge, writing about different teams, different leagues, different sports. It's going to be really fun. But at the same time, like, it's hard to leave the Commanders beat because it feels like there's a lot of exciting things on the horizon, and I'm gonna miss, not to get too sappy off the top, but I'm gonna miss being in the media annex with you and everybody else. It was 5 years. You really get to know people, and it's not every time that you can tell people, hey, like, my friend's car got robbed the night before we had to go to work, and so I had to
That's right.
borrow, my guy John Keim's pants.
It's a different pair of pants too, by the way.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like stuff like that. It just, I really loved the last 5 years. There was a lot of stuff that happened, man, from investigations to
Oh,
names to stadium. Like, there was just a lot of stuff you never expected to happen as a football beat writer. But I feel like I learned so much. And, I was 23 when I got this job, and I'm 29 now. I've changed a lot, as like grown a lot as a reporter and as a person. And yeah, it's been really cool.
I'm glad you feel that way. You
Yeah,
you'll be
exactly.
missed.
I should tell people that Keim had a nice moment the other day. It was my last day, and he's like, oh man, I just want to let you know, like, it's been great having you around. And like you're the same age as my sons, and it always felt like we could kind of have that similar joking relationship. I was like, oh man, I gotta tell you, like joking with you is just like joking with my grandfather.
That was a good one. Now I did take a poignant picture with Sam, a little selfie with him before he left. So I'm going to put that up for anybody watching on YouTube. Put that up here. So anyway, the other big question is, will you still be Sammy TikTok?
Yes, it is. I think that man, like one of the things I've learned over the last year and a half is like I love writing stories. Like writing has always been like my favorite thing. That's why I got into this. I love writing. I love sports, but the way that people consume information now, like it's podcasts, it's social media video, it's stuff like that. And so I think that no matter what I do, like no matter what stories you're trying to tell, I just think you have to translate it. It has to be a component of what you're doing because that's where people are. And that like that's great. If I just have to take my phone out and for a minute explain, hey, we're doing X, Y, and Z, and if that reaches more people, that's cool. So definitely I will be on TikTok. I will avoid the dances. I think so far I'll leave those to you. But we'll definitely still be on there.
I am thinking about launching my own TikTok channel where I just kind of do the, little overbite lip thing and all that. The other thing is because
I
you've been
You'll have
posting,
to go on YouTube to see that dance move you just hit.
but because you also been posting some weightlifting videos, can I now call you Sammy Swole?
No one is gassing me up about my powerlifting than you, and I appreciate that. I had never done it before. I had wandered into like a random gym near my house in October, and I've like gotten really into it. I have the shoes. I'm like, I hit broke my body weight on the cleans. I hit like 205 the other day. I was really excited about that. So, uh, yes, I'm gonna keep doing it, and you are welcome anytime. I know, oh, I can't play basketball because of my hamstrings, but if you can come
I've
like
never
2 weeks,
said that.
you absolutely have said that.
I've never said I can't play basketball. No, what I said with the basketball is when I was playing the last time I was going a lot, my calf muscles were being destroyed. But
Oh, okay,
I
okay.
would love to go play again. I would love to go play again. I do think I've entered that different stage of my basketballdom, where when you're younger, you see the old guys just sitting there launching threes. You're like, that dude's pissing me off because he's just a chucker. I don't want to just be a chucker, right? I want to compete, baby. So, anyways, but no, I would go play. I would definitely go play. I can't, my shoulder was all messed up, so I do push-ups, baby. So you don't
Okay.
get this jacked without doing something. Anyways, let's get on to something serious before people start. I've had 1,000 episodes. I might not make it to 1,003 if I keep going down this road. So let's go to the Commanders in your final spring with them. And by the way, after 5 years was when Dan Snyder bought the team from me, and I said the same thing. It looks like they're going up, some great things ahead, and here we are, 30 years later, baby. So, so anyways, but with the Commanders, what were some of the things that jumped out to you this spring, watching the practices and talk, obviously being up there and up close? What are some of the things that jumped out to you?
I have two things here. The second one is something that I've saved just for this podcast because I wanted to talk about it. But the first thing is, and I'm going to be a little bit of a downer here. I hate to say it, but there's so many reasons to feel optimistic about this team. I think they're clearly an improved roster. They've addressed, they've really bolstered the offensive line. I think they're better at corner now than they were a year ago. There's a lot of things to like. I am going to say that when I've been looking at things, I've been wondering why would they regress? What are some doses of pessimism that like I need to account for as a beat writer? And to me, you can look at the offense. They needed to sustain a lot of long drives last year, and that's something that historically is it's tough to do. They converted fourth down at a really high rate. They still don't have an elite edge rusher. They're going to be playing a second place schedule instead of a fourth place schedule. But to me, the biggest thing, and I wrote about this, is luck. And you might not think to yourself like, oh, like luck's not a huge deal. NFL games are still determined a lot by skill. But luck, I think, has been a big factor, and I'm going to explain that real quick. I'm not talking just about one score games, though they were 9-4 in one score games last year. I'm not talking just about health, even though they were very healthy. If one advanced metric says they were the fifth healthiest team,
Mhm.
um, I'm talking about this thing that the NFL tracks called luck dashboard, and the luck dashboard really is four things. It's when an opponent drops a pass on offense, when an opponent drops an interception, when they miss a kick that's like, a reasonable field goal within 30 yards or whatever, um, and when either team recovers a fumble. And the NFL tracks all this with like win probability. They've been doing it since 2022. It wouldn't be a podcast episode with me, Keim, if I wasn't explaining a random, intricate metric. So I was on True Media, I want you to know.
There you go.
But the Commanders were the luckiest team since they've been tracking this metric last season. 2022, 2023, 2024. They were the luckiest team on record. They benefited a lot from opponents dropping passes. Let's think about in New Orleans, the guy dropped the 2-point conversion. In week two, Malik Neighbors, when the Giants are down in the red zone, when their kicker's hurt, he drops that pass, and the Commanders, get a chance to go down the field and score. Obviously, those are things that happen to every team every season. But according to this stat, the luck dashboard on NFL, the Commanders were really, really lucky, and they didn't get that unlucky that often. And so when I hear that, I think to myself, oh, that's a thing that can change. Maybe the Commanders won't get as lucky this year.
And I think like that's something to consider because how does it translate from one year to the next? And is there an automatic regression or is it offset by other factors that come into play the next year? Whether it's an improved line, maybe Debo Samuel is just better at, Alameda and Diami combined, right? Like, so that's a thing that we don't know.
Yeah, and I would say, for example, those luck metrics where, it's an opponent dropping a pass or an interception or kicks or things like that, those situations aren't going to necessarily be offset by the additions of players. And a good example is in 2022, the first year they did this, the Giants were the luckiest team. And the next year they were the fourth luckiest team. 2023, the Packers were the luckiest team. The next year, they were the unluckiest team. And so I say that to say there is no correlation. Like you can go up and down basically on that metric based on whatever it is. But when you think to yourself in an offense, how do they get better? How does this team move forward? Like I think that they will clearly be better on offense with the additions that they've made. And so to me, it's like I think the most realistic expectation this year for the Commanders, better team, worse record. Not a ton worse, but I think that like considering everything, if they won 10 games or 11 games this year, I think that's still a huge success.
Yeah, no, I think, it's funny because that seems to be a number that a lot of people are kind of falling on. Part of it is because the schedule is tougher and other things. But the other thing with that, again, when you look at it, it's hard to quantify. And like you talk about the Packers one year to the next, well, they were still good both years. And I think when you're in these, the hard part for Washington, they were in, I think the key for them is not so much the luck factor is can you create more separation where you don't have to have those late game drives? Can't have they done enough to do that? You know what I'm saying? Like Jaden's growth. And then if again, if you don't have to have, the Atlanta drives, the Giants drives, et cetera, the Eagles drives, right? Like if you don't have to have those, that you can still have fall down in the luck category, but still be just as good or right around there.
Totally. I think the Packers are a great example because like all those things that you just mentioned are way bigger macro factors that
Right.
that I feel like we've talked about before.
Right.
And then we talked about all spring. And so in my head, I was thinking like, what do I need to be aware of that's going to be
Yeah.
a marginal
Yeah.
factor that could swing a game or two? In the luck, I think that's
Yes.
where that comes in.
Yeah, and
Um,
I agree because the other one you forgot to mention was Devontae Smith in that second Eagles game. Like he dropped one too, and that's when like yes, those are big factors. Then I guess for people listening, you get the flip side is well, some of the couple plays against the Steelers, right? That somebody drops a pass in that game or misses a block in that game. That's an unlucky play. Does that bet? You know what I mean? So I think that's where it's hard to always quantify. I do think it's important to look at it, but I think it's always hard to quantify at times.
Totally. And I would point out a thing that I totally forgot until I started looking into this luck metric. The Steelers They went on, remember, it was like 4th and 15, and they ran a fake punt really early, and it
Hmm.
was
Yep.
wide open, and the dude just dropped the ball.
Right.
Like,
That's right.
that's a
That's right.
lucky break for
That's right.
Washington. But
That's
then
that's a
later,
yeah.
the
I
luck
know.
is, it goes back and forth.
Yeah.
This guy quantifies the
Mhm.
impact of each play based on win probability. And so like that's how he arrives at the who was the luckiest, who was the unluckiest. But it's Tom Bliss at the NFL is the guy. He's a really good follow
Yeah.
on Twitter. But these like to me, I asked Dan Quinn and I was asking some players like whether they believe in luck, right? Because it's like, when you're a football player, I was talking to the lineman and Marcus Mariota, and it's like you can't believe in luck. You're a football player. You have to
Right.
control everything all the time. Preparation, I know this, I know that. Dan Quinn told me he was like, I believe in luck. Like a part of the fun of the game is the unknown. Like
Right. Right.
Devontae Smith is an incredible receiver, but he drops that pass. That's just how that play went. But he was like, I can't control it, so I spend no time thinking about it. And so I thought that was like a perspective from DQ where I was like, okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And again, like they'll have plays this year that will be both ways, right? And so but that is like if you get more, or again, if you put distance, or if you don't have to have all the fourth down conversions, for example, that would play into maybe being worse here, but again, just as good. But it is hard too because the schedule is tougher. On paper, going into the season, it looks tougher. And when you look at what these guys have done, how much can they offset that with their own with their own improvements?
I think a lot. Like when you look at the games where they played bad teams last year, I think of the Cardinals or the Browns or the Panthers. Like they beat up on bad teams last year. Like they clearly separated themselves, and that was a big part of it. And even against Detroit in the playoffs or Cincinnati early in the season, like they understood what they needed to do to win that game. Um, and I think that like the development and everything is that's going to propel them. And to go back to the luck thing one more time, I asked Tyler Biadasz, the center, I was like, "Do you believe in luck?" And he was like, "I believe in five," meaning Jaden Daniels. And I think
Right.
that's the perfect answer for like this Commander season is like, you know, there's a mindset thing, I think, and you probably felt this too. Like
Yeah.
there was a period, it was around the Hail Mary, but even before, you just walked into that locker room and there was like a belief that you did
Yep.
not feel
Yep.
in years
Yep.
past. And Clellan Ferrell, I thought, actually said it really well after the NFC Championship game. I was like, "What do you feel like you guys accomplished this year?" And he said, something to the effect of, "We did what teams have not done here in a long time, which is believe in ourselves."
Yep.
And
Yep.
it sounds like corny and hokey or whatever, but like I think that
Right.
stuff is really real because I go back to 2023. I can't remember where we were. We were on the road somewhere, and I walked into the locker room, and Jahan Dotson was like pissed. He was like, "Man, whenever there's a big moment, we blink. Whatever it is, like our team blinks, and you didn't feel that last year." And so I think the talent and the mechanics and the additions, all the things that we've talked about all offseason, those really matter. But having the belief, do you believe in luck? I believe in five. That tells you all you need to know about the mindset of the team.
No, I think that's a great point because yes, and you could tell like in 2023, you could walk in the locker room like not only did they lose, they're done. They are done because they didn't have it was more the lack of belief, but also the confidence in their belief. Whereas I think last year they had a confidence in what they believed, right? Because I think every team goes in the season with some level of belief, right? But I think it was the confidence they had in that was built with number five, especially. Like they knew with him that they always had a chance, and that filtered. But I think it went beyond him, but it definitely he's a huge, huge component of that. But I think that's a good point because I don't think I've been around a team where you just like they're even going into that Eagles game, Sam, the last game, like on paper, the Eagles are better, but I think they're going to find a way. Now, I would have lost a lot of money, but the bottom line is it's just because you thought somehow they'll find a way. And I think, that's the hard, again, it's why sports are really crazy because you would think pro athletes would always have confidence in themselves and the team and all that. But it doesn't always go that way because it's always in relation to their peers, not to the average person. So like that to me is a hard thing, but I think that's something that is it's again another thing that's hard to quantify. How do you put when you're factoring a team success or when you predictions, whatever, how do you factor that in? It matters.
I had this conversation with Andrew Wiley about the luck thing where I was like, "Do you believe in it?" And he was like, no, I do believe in positive like thinking. Like if
Mm,
I'm gonna go out there against Von Miller and I'm like, oh, Von's so fast, he's gonna beat me to the short corner, blah blah blah. Like I feel like I get unlucky. And so it's all about the player thinking to themselves. And he was like, this is why I don't think that like when my opponent drops a pass or when they drop an interception, I theoretically have nothing to do with that. But he was like, I think it's all about mindset and maybe they're like down on themselves at that moment. And so, like a lot of these guys like you said, it is in relation to each other. Like, and it's all about, hey, how do I get myself to be the best that I can?
mm.
And he was like, when Jaden's in the huddle, the only thing I'm thinking is like, let me go do my effing job. Like, I just need to hold down my thing, and he's gonna get me right. Like, that's a huge, huge deal. And I think it even goes back to like, I had an offensive lineman earlier this year tell me like, the sacks number. The offensive line looks so good because they don't have any sacks, but like one of the linemen was telling me I should have allowed 2 or 3 sacks by now, but Jaden like makes him miss, and then like I look great, he looks great, and we all keep going.
Andrew Wiley told me that early in the year last year. Exactly that, right? It was exactly that where it's like, is there a big difference? Well, yeah, it's number five. He makes you, and you know how it is too. Like you talk to other people around the league or whatever, number five makes up for a lot of wrongs. And he can make a lot of wrongs right because of his skill set. And again, like that's why when you look at this team, like sometimes you look at the roster, you separate it out like, well, have they done enough here? Have they done enough here? But again, with Jaden, like how much does he offset all of whatever else is going on? And you can't make up for everything, but man, he can make up for a lot.
Andrew and Nick Allegretti have been very hesitant to compare Jaden to the guy they used to play with, Patrick Mahomes. And they're like, hey, like it's way too early. He still has a long way to go. But they both have mentioned that like both of these guys, you could pay Pat a $500 million, and the thing he wants to do more than anything is like win a football game.
Right.
Like, and Allegretti pointed this out. You can say like, oh, Jay, like he was like the thing that people forget about Jay's rookie year is that there were games where like Jay only threw for 190 yards, but we won. Like Jay knows what it takes to win a game. If
Mhm.
it's 190 yards and a 3 yard scramble on 4th and 1 to like just keep the chains moving, he'll do it. Like it's not about the empty calorie stats. It's not about, hey, let me make sure that I look good or I get this thing. Like they were like they see the similarities in their mindsets and just the willingness to do whatever it takes to get the W.
The mindset is huge. And that's the number one thing last year when people would ask me about it, I'm like, he's going to be good. Not because we see the talent. I've seen talent before, right? It's because the mindset that you heard people talk about when they witness things up close away from the field. And you always have to be careful. Like, and this is all this in the spring, you have to be careful because sometimes people shovel stuff at you and you don't know what's real or what's not. With him, like it wasn't just that they said, oh, he works hard. It's that they're giving specific examples. He's coming here at 5:45 every day. He's going over plays on the plane ride home. He's doing his own walkthrough on the plane ride home from the draft, right? Like those are the things that you would hear that add up. And that's the mindset part.
So my second thing that I was going to tell you is I was like very curious when people were talking about how Jaden just imbues them with confidence. I was like I was like thinking like how would you see that on the field? Like how could I see it from the press
Mm.
box? Um and if I were gonna still be on the beat this season, I definitely would not say this right now, and I'd want to see it like play out and write a whole story about it. But I'm not gonna write a whole story about it this year in all
Maybe
likelihood. So
I
I'm just gonna
will.
say it on the podcast.
Maybe I will.
Maybe you can do it. And people, I want people to watch out for this year because in the last practice of minicamp, Jaden had a throw. It was red zone. Jaden had a throw up the middle to Chris Moore, the veteran
Mhm.
receiver,
Yep, yep,
wide open in the end zone.
yep,
Dropped it.
yep.
2 plays later, Jaden rolls out right. I think he rolls out right, and he hits Chris Moore in the back of the end zone. It's really tight coverage from Percy
Yep.
Butler, and Moore brings it in. And I thought to myself, like, it just like sparked something in my brain that I had been like thinking about earlier in the season, like last year, that I just like never gotten to write about. But I was like, I think that Jaden, like when a receiver drops a pass, like I think that he might go back to them quickly, or he might like, is there something about like he's showing a receiver? Because when last summer I talked to a lot of his like high school teammates, his college teammates, and they were like,
Did you watch a lot of his plays?
I watched a few of his plays, as you might know. And so last night, in preparation for this podcast, I went back and I watched all 21 drops that
Mm,
receivers had from Jaden
really?
last year. I did. Because I thought to myself, is there anything here? And surprise, time, what do you think? Did I find anything notable when I went back?
Well, here's what I would say to that. Before I even get to the yes or no, I think a lot of what it is I think he has confidence in his teammates. And I don't know if it's as much like, oh, he dropped it, I'm going to go back to him, as much as it is, this is the right football play.
That was my exact thought where I was like, my hunch, and I was like, like maybe he wouldn't do that. He's just gonna make the right football play. And when I look back, the data is muddy. There's no like, when I was like looking at the plays, he doesn't, make it a focus to go back to guys, generally to go back to guys when they drop the ball. But I do think it's that way with Terry McLaurin. Terry had 4 drops last year, and Jaden went back to him on the next play or like 3 plays later. It was like the next play, 3 plays later, the next play, 3 plays later of the 4 drops. Like he very immediately, and maybe that's just the right football play. Maybe there's like, oh, he's the best receiver. Of course, they're going to throw it to him a lot. But like to me, it was like there were stretches where like he didn't go to Terry all the time. And that seemed like a more concerted
So,
effort maybe than in
so
other times.
my thought on that would be competitor knows competitor. Like I know, like, hey, he dropped this. I'm going back to him because this dude isn't going to drop too. So,
Right.
and he's going to fight his ass off to catch this one. Like that would be my mindset if I'm Jaden.
Right. And I don't know if that's like I might be putting something into Jaden or Terry's head that is does not exist, and these are just circumstantial. I would be curious if, and I know this is a podcast on, in the middle of June about the NFL. Only the real sickos are listening to this, and I say that in a complimentary way, and I
By the way,
appreciate you.
shout out Mrs. Fortier. I haven't done that yet. Very
Yeah,
good.
she's the truest sicko for sure. Uh, but people who are listening to this and you like I'm not going to be as tapped in. I would love to know, like, if you see Terry drop a ball, like, does Jaden go back to him within three plays again? I would just be curious because it's something that we saw last year in a limited sample size. And my favorite one was in the Bears game. Like, Terry shakes Tyreek Stevenson on a comeback, and Jaden throws it a little high, and Terry doesn't high point it, and he drops it. And the next play on 3rd and 9, they're like, oh, Terry, it feels like they're like, Terry just sold this comeback and he just beat Tyreek Stevenson down the field for a 61-yarder. And it's like they go right back to him and they have a great connection and like, you hit a huge play. It's like little nuances like that, Keim, and like honestly, like, not to get all sappy, but like one of my favorite things about football and about being on this beat is like you can like everybody can watch something and notice something different.
Yes.
And like I was really excited to come on this podcast today and tell you about this thing that I
Oh, it's
noticed
pretty
because like
cool.
this is like maybe it's a thing, maybe it's not. It's a theory, the drop theory or whatever. But like coming on here and like comparing notes with you and being like, oh, like one of the things I remember most, man, is like in Cincinnati last year, we're like running down to the the locker room afterward, and you were like, after Jaden throws that touchdown to Terry, and you were like, oh, like can you believe that blitz pickup by McNichols? And I was like, no, what do you like? I was like admiring how like sick that touchdown throw was, and you had just immediately noticed McNichols on that incredible blitz pickup, and I was like, okay, Kyle, like this is one of my favorite things about the beat, man.
Well, I will say this too, and that's why I going back and watching a play on the 10th or 11th time, I will still see something I didn't on the first time. That's why you do it. I think the fun part to me is it's like if you're a food taster, you might taste something different in this meal that you didn't before. and it just really resonates. But I love finding it. But like you, to your point, I think the fun part about football is finding that little thing like, oh, wow, I think I just learned something here. Or maybe I learned something. Now I go talk to the people who know, right? Like the people in the huddle does this like lead to something? And it might just be, as you know, sometimes we get not a crazy theory, but like a theory on something, and you see it. Then you go ask them like, well, not really, but it leads you to an interesting point in a conversation, and it's a conversation starter. So no, I agree with you on that. And with Jaden too, like we saw this at LSU as well, right? Like it wasn't always going back to the same guy, but it was always the never having fear to make the big throw on the next time, regardless of who it is. And I remember even that Florida game, he had a big throw to a tight end on the right side where the guy drops it wide open. And it could like, does it frustrate a guy? Next play, he hits a guy like on a tight, down on the left side in a tight spot. Like that's the kind of stuff where it's like his mindset is just like, I'm going to attack regardless, right? And even going back to the spring practice with the Chris Moore play, that first throw was a freaking the seam. It was a beautiful, like he turns and the ball is right there. And I'm sure if you're Chris Moore, like, holy shit, like, excuse my language, holy crap, like, I can't believe the ball is on me like that. But it was a perfect, perfect, perfect throw. And that's one where it's like, you're Jaden, like, you got to catch it. I know it's just practice, but you're still going to make the play because you're aggressive. The guy's there. I got to make this throw. So I think I love the mindset part of it.
think like that is the better conclusion than I even framed. When I went back and watched the 21 incompletions, the takeaway wasn't that he was trying to get it to guys to show them he still believed in them. It was the lack of fear and the
Mm.
willingness to just make the right football play. And there are two examples I thought that really like stood out about that. In week 10, Ertz drops a pass like wide open over the middle. It would have moved the chains. It would have potentially allowed them to go up two scores instead of just kicking a field goal. And then obviously we know that they lose because of that. But on 4th and 9, late in the fourth quarter, when they're trying to make that comeback, like he throws it right back to Ertz, and we know that he trusts Ertz, and that wasn't surprising. The most illustrative example of what you just talked about to me was actually in Week 16, the Philly game. People might not remember this, but Jamison Crowder had a play on the right sideline. It was a tough catch. He was like leaning out of bounds, but he drops the ball, and
Yeah.
and
Oh,
and
yeah. Yeah.
so and Jaden did not look his way for the next like two quarters. 36 plays later, had not targeted Crowder, but in the game-winning moment with 10 seconds left, he throws that game-winning touchdown to
Yeah.
Crowder, who he hadn't had a play since that drop. But it's like it looks like when you're watching it, Jaden's mindset is this is the right football play. Crowder's in the right spot. And that was the play, that they had practiced
Yeah.
a bunch and practiced beforehand. Like, just no fear to go back to this guy, even though he'd had a drop the last time he targeted him.
And what do you think that does for the receivers?
And, like exactly, like I think it gives the exact same thing we're talking about with Wiley, where it's like, oh, Jaden's gonna get me right. If I drop this, it doesn't matter. Next play, I need to just go be my best, and like I just need to go do my job. And if I don't do it this time, that's okay.
And I think it also like if you're a receiver like and you throw it to me and I drop it and you come back to me, I want to make this play for you. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I want to make it for me, but I want to make it for you because you're showing that level of confidence in me to come back to me in a key spot. And I don't know that when Jameson's running that route there, that he has that time to think about that. But maybe at the line of scrimmage, like before you run the route, like I got to come through here because he showed they, you know what I mean? Like they're calling it for me or whatever, however it unfolds. But because sometimes you don't know, like, but on the sideline you have to feel that, right? Like, and I'm sure he's going up to them and saying stuff because that's just how he is. But I do think like that plays a role in. I think it's also why like it keeps guys. You keep running your routes because hey, the guy still can get me the ball, and I think it's also indicative of why a lot of guys had good years with him.
To me, this is sort of the same conversation as like culture. And I feel like, I don't know, just the years covering like Ron Rivera, it feels like sort of like the more you talk about culture, the less effective it is maybe, or like there just has to be an underpinning of talent and winning that happens for a culture to be good. And it's like I was talking to Deron Payne in the locker room last year where it's like, hey, there's a lot more guys in here playing dominoes. There's a lot more guys in here playing cards. Like they stay later. Um, and I don't know if the thing that you're talking about with Jamison Crowder, where it's like, oh, I want to make a play for him. I don't think that's conscious. I don't think that you're ever thinking about
Right,
it
right.
or that you're verbalizing it. But like in those big moments, like I do think there's something intrinsic or subconscious about
Yeah,
like it's just important to make that happen. And I think that like it's probably hard for us even to see it on the day to day
for sure.
to be like, oh, like because it's just like it's like with Jaden's weight, like we're talking about before the season. It's like I don't know, man. He looks kind of the same to me. Like it, like I don't necessarily think that's a thing, but if people feel it and they believe it, then like I think that that shows manifests in important ways.
Sure. And I also think you probably may be more cognizant of it during the week too. Like,
Totally.
and then you get to Sundays and it just kind of happens organically like that. But during the week, when you think about it, it's like, yeah, like again, Crowder might think like, man, maybe it's not in that moment. He's like, I got to come through this guy. But maybe in the subsequent games, it is because he came back to me when it mattered most. He trusted me when it mattered most. What does that like? So what does that do to you during the week? Does it help you watch a little bit more film? Because like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. And God, it's hard. It's really hard. And winning pushes everything, right? But Jaden pushes winning. And so I think like it's all tied together, but it's a unique situation because of that impact. And I think it's very unique.
I think like it's not talent or culture, it's talent and culture.
Right,
Because
right,
like,
right.
we're watching after one of the OTAs a couple weeks ago, like we're watching Mikey Sanders and Debo Samuel
Yep,
practice
yep.
together, right? And it's like I remember there's been so many examples of that. Benjamin St. Juice has worked with Terry
Yep,
plenty, like in
yep.
years past or
Mhm.
other corners. And it's just like there just wasn't and Mikey has the right mindset, the mindset a lot of guys have. Like, hey, like I know what an inside release looks like, or how someone would like use their shoulders to set me up outside to then go inside. But like it doesn't matter that I know it. I need my body to just
Right,
react.
right.
Like I just need to do it enough times where I'm like inherently doing it, and I think that that's what we're talking about. And it's like Jaden being Jaden maximizes the effective. Like if they didn't have a quarterback, like Mikey doing that might not matter as much. But now when you have a quarterback and the margins, like that's why I think we're talking about luck earlier. Like when you're really good, like the margins they're thin, but they become so much more important because of like how they play an impact on winning.
No, I think you're right. And listen, quarterback always matters because if you don't have that quarterback with all that other stuff, maybe you're an 8 or 9 win team, right? Because, and maybe not, I don't know if it's even to that point, right? But because there were a lot of very positive developments last spring before we knew how good Jaden would be early on, right? But it does foster that. And I also think for them, it's a lot of bringing in the right guys and guys who work and want to be part of that. And, you are right though about culture. Like, you hear the word culture more from when questions are asked versus what they're saying. And in the past, it was always answers to questions more than it was the questions themselves, right? And trying to talk your way into that good culture. And sometimes it was better, but it wasn't like it was last year. And I think I think it was very intentional how they did it. But it does like, winning always helps foster. But listen, man, like I've talked to guys who say like they were part of really good teams that they felt had bad culture in other places. And then good
Totally.
teams where they felt like it was good culture. It's just that they
What
didn't,
they didn't.
maybe they didn't have the quarterback.
Totally. And I think that like that is maybe the most interesting thing about the Commanders right now, other than like Jaden's growth and development, is like can they get the alchemy right around him? Because
Mhm.
you have the thing that everyone needs, and now it's just supplemental pieces. And it feels like with Tunsil, with Samuel, with Kinlaw, with all the different things that they're with the draft picks, like all the different things that they're doing, it feels like you got the star. Now you're like eating your vegetables and like trying to put together a well
Mhm.
constructed long term roster. And can they do it? Like it's fascinating. And this is the part where I'm like, like it's
It
it's
is,
it's gonna be really exciting.
it is. And it's, because the one thing I would tell, like year to year, you don't know how good they're going to be, right? Because it's really hard to predict. But if I say over the next 10 years, more often than not, they're going to be good because I think the way their approach is the right one and they have the quarterback. And, I've always felt like maybe they need another good draft class beyond this one to get to the point where you have the roster where you say, like, now you can roll with this and going into the year maybe with more knowns than unknowns. So but yeah, I agree.
It's man, it's just such an exciting time. Like, and to be a little selfish here, like I got on this beat like a week before COVID started, and it was like the dawn of like a new hopeful era, and like I remember like I was out to dinner in Alexandria, and I was like going to go to Ron Rivera's press conference in Richmond, and then I got the notification the NBA season was canceled, and like since then, there's just been a lot of like false hope and a lot of like times where oh, this guy's the guy, not the guy. This guy really does seem to be the guy,
Yeah.
and it's just I'm really excited for over the 5 years in the beat, I spent a lot of time in the parking lot talking to fans, and um, there's a lot of them that have like put in a lot of time, and especially ones that stuck through the darkest days in 2022 and 2023. Like there's, or and before that, like I'm really excited that football matters in DC again. It's gonna be like it's gonna be really cool.
It's a lot more. Listen, man, we all know like it's more fun when people want to talk to you about the team that you cover and not always just like not always preceded by an F them. So it is much better. So Sam, this is why I'm going to miss you because I love these kind of conversations. You know that. I've always appreciated that because I like how you look at things and how you dig into things. So I really thank you. And like, you'll be missed out there, although it means there's another meal for Nikki to take home. From Chef Connor. So, that's always not a bad thing for her. So, anyways, thank you, man, for coming on and for always coming on. And we'll be in touch. So, thanks, man.
For sure. Thank you for having me. And just one quick plug. You're being very nice. I hope people appreciate that. Like, especially with the state of journalism nowadays, like it's not often that like you get a person who has covered 500 games of your team or spent on your team for 30 years who has all the history and the context. So I don't mean to gas you up too much, Keim, but like it was really cool watching ball.
Like I said, you just heard it. It cut off right in the middle. I'm pretty sure Sam was going to say that I was the best person he's ever worked around. I don't know. Maybe I'm putting words in his mouth, but I thought that's where he was going. Maybe I'm wrong. Anyways, I appreciate you tuning in. And thanks to Sam for joining me. And thank you again, as always, for listening. I'll be back on Monday talking to former Redskin running back Clinton Portis. I'll talk to you next time.